Hi, in this video, I'm going to show you how you can create nested workflow in SAP. Here, you are looking at one workflow which I've created, which make use of the feature of nested workflow. First of all, as usual, there's a workflow started, and from here it goes down. Try to set a name, and name is a container element here, which is of this type. Okay, you can choose some appropriate type which you think is appropriate. I'm just choosing this one, and when I set the name, I'm going to set it to Happy John, for example. Okay, so this is what I'll do. And then once I set the name, I will just send an email to say, yeah, I'm going to start processing for Happy John, and this is how it's going to appear, right? Start processing for Happy John, just to signify that I'm starting processing. Now here's the key. This is the next one, which is really a nested workflow. It says start process something until expiry, right? So if you go inside this activity, it is actually calling another workflow here, right, which I have created separately. And if you go inside and look at this workflow, this is how the sub workflow looks like. Okay, from the start it goes down, it tries to set an expiry date, and in this particular case it will set the expiry date to 25th January, and expiry date is actually a local container element here, right? And here you go, this is the expiry date. There's a local container, and this is the type that is being used, define it. You can choose some other types if you like. And after the expiry date is set, it comes down here, it does a pause using the user decision, and in the business workplace it will appear with this thing that says click to continue, right? So the pause is just to allow us to examine the workflow a little bit better, just to have a pause. And later on it will just increment a counter, and incrementing the counter is like this, right? So it will just increment the counter by 1 is to control the loop, and counter is a local container here of this type. Okay, now it comes down here and it's gonna try to do a loop, but it will not loop in this particular case because we are setting the expiry date to 25th January and today's date is 31st January. So 31st will be greater than 25. It will exit and it will come out, and it will send an email to say completed processing for Happy John, right? So I send an email, and the name is Happy John, which I have assigned earlier, right? So it's gonna come here. So you should see completed processing for Happy John in this particular case, right? So this is how it's gonna go. Now let's do a little bit of a closer examination. One of the things you must bear in mind is that in order for the name to be able to pass from the main workflow to the sub workflow properly, there's a few binding that has to happen properly. Number one is that at this main workflow, so right now I'm back to this main workflow. At the main workflow, I have to make sure that I'm binding name from the workflow to the step of this high-level step called process something until expiry. So I'm going to make sure that this bound from workflow to the step itself. That's one, right? Then after that, inside the sub workflow, right? So this is inside the sub workflow. There's a few things. Number one is that I'm going to make sure that name is defined as an import parameter, right? So this is then to allow from external passing in, from external the main workflow passing in. Then next is at this step, I gotta make sure that it is bound from the workflow to this step itself, right? So, and to do that, you come here, you click on this binding. I'm gonna make sure that this is done, right? So this one is to bound from the workflow to the step of send email, right? So you're gonna make sure all this binding is in place, otherwise the name will not be able to pass from the main workflow down to the sub workflow, and from the sub workflow to the send mail activity, right? So this is very important. Okay, so when all this thing is done, then you're ready to run, right? So let's try to run it and see what do we get.